Hello.
Hello.
And welcome back to another reaction video. We're sorry, okay? We are working on other types of videos, different like content, but they take longer to film. They record over multiple days and they take longer time to edit and stuff. So in the meantime, reaction video. But we do always have a great time looking at these throwback clips to goth fashion in various decades. And today we are revisiting what I think is the most glorious decade, the 90s. We had such an incredible time looking at the last 90s goth clip. So today we're going to be looking at another 90s goth clip, this time on the LA goth club scene in the late 90s. So let's get into the video.
Well, theirs is a world like you've never seen before. Goth is all about dark music. It's about symbols of death and even dressing like vampires, right down to the fangs you see here. Tonight, UPN News 13 investigates LA's goth scene, from the clubs to the cloths to the creepiest of collectibles. Abby Taylor is here right now to tell us what she found.
I found a lot of interesting stuff there, Al. It is a controversial and hard to understand phenomenon. Why would people obsess about death, dress up like vampires, and keep dead things around the house?
If you see me making faces, it's just because of that noise.
This is one of the caveats of going through old clips and videos and stuff. There's always going to be something wrong with some of them.
Yeah.
Like in our 90s goth video,
I hope that doesn't happen again.
when half the people watching the video couldn't actually hear the clips because it was mono audio, and if you listen to it on like a singular speaker phone or something, you just can't hear it. Again, we have this goth vampire mashup. I don't know if it was the 90s when this connotation really stuck and became sort of a hand-in-hand thing.
Well, now we know that that's when like the Interview with the Vampire movie came out, and I guess the books were popular, so maybe.
Because like in the 80s goth clips, they never mention vampires. Actually, yeah, in the BBC 80s goth one, they do kind of bring up vampires, but they were like literal vampires, you know, like they weren't just goths. They literally thought they were vampires. They had like not a coven. What's the vampire equivalent of a coven? I feel like we should know that. But they had like a clan. That's it, a clan, right? That's what you call them, a vampire clan. So actually, never mind, I lied. In the BBC 80s goth one, there were a few vampires in it. But I feel like in all the 90s goth clips, it's like, oh, you're a vampire. And that connotation is still alive today, I feel like. It's 50-50, like someone will either call me an emo or a vampire.
No one ever calls me a vampire.
I get Dracula a lot.
I don't. I think that the news and like documentaries and stuff, they want to find people that are like this. They've chosen the people that are like this because they know it'll have the huge shock value. They try and get people to say things that will shock people.
They go for more reactionary people, because if you see someone who's just like wearing eyeliner in the corner of the club and maybe like some leather, and then you see someone walk by in a cape and fangs, you're like, I'm going to talk to the guy in the cape and fangs, because they're more likely to get a reaction from people when we put this on TV.
Yeah, unless I'm wrong and it was just very popular. Like I said, like if I was to do a thing like this right now, I would definitely show off one of my vampire looks and tell them how I think it's important and how like vampires really inspired me and my fashion and the music I listen to and just my whole life. You know, it's still a thing now, so maybe it was just a huge thing back then as well.
Also, they said, oh, like dressing up like vampires and keeping dead things around your house. Triggered. A little bit triggered. Because we like it, Jan. That's why.
It's about ghoulish nightclubs and music that some say feeds an obsession with death in young people. Distraught parents appear on national talk shows.
This would give you a headache.
Desperate to see their teenagers change.
I have been looking for those like Jenny Jones clips and like the few that you saw briefly there, and I cannot find them. Like, it's very difficult to find the specific episodes. So if anyone watching this video has any of those clips, the goth and vampire specific ones, or knows where to find them, please message us or leave it in the comment section down below. Message us on Instagram or something, because I've been looking for them and it's like near impossible to find.
Places like the Fang Club, adorned in vampire makeup, elaborate dress, black hair mostly, and fangs.
Hers are permanent.
Welcome to LA's underground gothic scene. For most of these people, this is a once-a-week costume party, a fun sort of self-expression.
Imagine having a weekly goth night of that sort of caliber. In Ireland, we were lucky to we had 2 goth nights and they ran monthly, and then sometimes they just skipped a month to like bi-monthly. The other goth club night broke down to like once every few months. The original one that was monthly doesn't even run monthly anymore, but now we've finally gotten like a new dark wave gothic club night that runs monthly here, which is crazy because we live in the capital city of this country. Like, this is the capital city and we're lucky because we have one monthly goth club night.
For some, Gothic is a full-time lifestyle.
I'm also a professional and lifestyle dominatrix.
Shady, who's at the fan club tonight with fellow dominatrix Sabrina, lives and dresses the part all the time, except her fangs are removable because they're inappropriate for her straight job as a makeup artist.
Can I touch it?
They're sharper than my dog's teeth.
They are very sharp fangs.
Yeah.
They are very, very sharp fangs. I would be terrified. I have regular teeth and I bite myself quite frequently. I couldn't trust myself, especially not on a night out with those kind of fangs.
That's why I haven't got my real fangs in yet, because I'm terrified that I'm gonna bite my cheeks or bite my mouth or my lip in my sleep. I was in the dentist the other day and I was gonna ask, and my dentist is really cool, so I feel like she'd be up for that kind of thing. And I was like, don't do it, because I just don't trust myself. I feel like I'll just wake up and my lips will just be torn apart.
My teeth are already too big for my mouth.
They don't stay really sharp for too long though.
Also, did you love the leather PVC collar cape?
I badly need that in my life.
That's incredible. That is a 90s fashion moment right there. This is why I love the 90s. Things like this.
Shady describes her look as ethereal and romantic.
It feels natural. I'm very comfortable in this, and I think that it's a form of expression.
It's very vampire-ish.
Yes, it is.
The makeup as well is interesting because it seems a lot more toned down.
I don't know, I'm so confused because a lot of these are vampires or vampire goths or just vampires.
Well, the club is called Fan Club, so I feel like it's going to attract a good mix of both. And like I said, it was the 90s. Vampire goth was peak in the 90s. If you weren't a Batcave enthusiast, you were a vampire goth or you were just like a mall goth. Those were the 3 genders of goth in the 90s. But you know, I'm thinking just the makeup is really like understated as opposed to the late 80s, early 90s stuff. It seems to have come down sort of closer to the vampire goth makeup that people do now.
I think they're all going for like the romantic vampire look, and when I do that, normally I only do a little bit of eyeshadow. In the last video that we did when I did the vampire look, I went mad with the eyeliner and stuff, but normally I would want to look undead, vampire, naturally,
more ethereal,
like that,
esoteric,
rather
kind
than
of
going bold. So I guess that's why.
It's very morbid.
A lot of those in the Gothic scene shop in places like this for home decor and accessories. It's called necromance.
The reoccurring theme is death. Coffins, coffin jewelry, bats, spiders, old funerary memorabilia.
Here you find bones of every kind, including human skulls.
Necromance. It's gone now.
Yeah, so sad.
We actually went to it when we were in LA in 2018. We were actually not going to go to Necromance the day we did. So we had like one free day on our schedule. And I was like, how do you want to use the day? We can go do this thing, we can go do this. And I was like, or we could walk down there and there's like a few thrift shops on the way. There's like a Spirit of Halloween, and then there's Necromance, and there's like a bunch of other little alternative shops around there. And we were like, yeah, screw it, we'll go do that. I can't believe it. Like, by the time we went back last year, it had already been closed down.
Unfortunately, when we did go, we couldn't buy a lot.
We did get some like small trinkets and gifts for like friends of ours and stuff. But it was an amazing store. It was beautiful to look at.
It's kind of like going to a museum.
It was basically like a cool little gothic museum of macabre artifacts and things like that. So
why the obsession with death?
They romanticize death, but they're not willing to like partake in it, but they like embrace it and they don't really have a problem with it. You know, they see it as something romantic rather than something depressing.
I did want to mention that.
About the gothic sort of predisposition for an affinity for
obviously
death.
Everybody is different. But for myself, and I was talking to friends about it, we were talking about how we can look at things like this, like skulls or taxidermy or graveyards, And we actually don't think of the death aspect of it. Like, we think of it as life rather than death. You think like, oh, I'm alive. And you just see it like a beautiful thing, which I guess I don't really know about the whole romance. Like, that's kind of like more like what Vilvallo or something would do with some of his songs, you know, join me in death and stuff like that. But I don't see it like that. Like, I don't find like death to be romantic or anything like that. I am scared of it. And thankfully, I can enjoy things like graveyards and stuff, even though I am afraid of death, because I just think they're beautiful aesthetically. It kind of just makes you think about life and how like you're thankful to be alive. Yeah, I just see it as a beautiful thing, like bones, and I just don't think of the death part of it myself, which people are probably like, how? That's how I feel anyways. Like, people ask me this all the time, like, why do you love graveyards so much? Are you just like obsessed with death and dying? And if someone dies, like, are you like excited to go to a funeral? Are you excited about death? I'm terrified of death. I am like, no, I'm a vampire, I'm gonna live forever. No thank you to death.
I'm in two minds. So I do agree with your point that I generally don't think about it when I see things like that. I don't think about it, I think, the way your average person would. I don't look at like a skeleton and think, death. I just look at it and I'm like, oh, a skeleton, cool. I like skeletons, they're spooky looking.
It would only be the odd time I would think about life in comparison, like, because I normally wouldn't think of it as a death thing.
That's what I mean. Like, I wouldn't look at things like that and think of it, but also I am aware that at the same time it does cross my mind occasionally. I'm literally staring at two gravestones right now. Behind the camera, I have two faux gravestones on the wall. And I do think it is a thing of, like you were saying, basically memento mori, like remember that you will die. And it instead of thinking about it in the morbid sense, you think about it in the, oh, well, I'm alive and I should appreciate the fact that I am alive and I should live life to the fullest. So I am sort of split down the middle with it in that sense that I don't think of it that way most of the time. I just sort of enjoy the imagery, aesthetics wise, that is something that my eyes and brain appreciates and is drawn to. I've suffered from like existential dread pretty much my entire adult life. I regularly just zone out and start to get depressed and panic about the thought of death and like how life is a finite thing. And I do think that it is sort of a coping mechanism to a degree to sort of overexpose myself to this sort of stuff so that then I don't freak out about it as much. I feel like if I was to be sort of like, for lack of a better term, a normal person, and that I didn't constantly see things like this, and I was to react in the way that they do when they see things like that and they get creeped out and scared, I think that would make it so much worse for me. I already regularly have panic attacks and bouts of existential dread thinking about things like this. So if it was to the point that I literally saw a skull or a gravestone and was like, death, like a normal person would be, and freak out about it, I feel like it would happen to me more frequently. Maybe I'm putting myself through exposure therapy without ever realizing it. Maybe my brain did this just to sort of trick me into feeling better about it, and maybe that is why I like this stuff. But I don't really have, like you said, the whole sort of romantic obsession with it that I know a lot of people do. I can't say it's not a big part of the culture, because it is. There are a large portion of people in goth and other dark like subcultures that do sort of have this romantic, not obsession, but just attraction, I suppose, to death, and that is how they make peace with it in their own way, that they view it as this romantic sort of experience, you know, and I can't fault that. But for me personally as well, I just don't have that.
I definitely understand why people don't get it though, because we have like coffins and stuff, you know, and I want to own more coffins and another coffin, and I want to be in the coffin, and it's like, how can you get in a coffin and not think of being dead? Because I'm a vampire, so I'm undead, and like, so that's why I want to be in a coffin.
And that should show you how desensitized I am to that sort of imagery, because when I was making the point about this and I said I have two gravestones over here, I completely ignored the 5-foot coffin that we have to the left side of the camera. Literally didn't even cross my mind.
Terry King is one of Goth's top clothing designers. She says the look has a heavy Renaissance influence. She calls it eloquent, almost hedonistic clothing. It's like a lot of corsets and a lot of velvet and a lot of satin. And it's a lot of work getting into this stuff. You can't get dressed by yourself.
No, you can't. That's part of the fun.
Dressing to go out is practically a ritual.
Wigs are like part of the deal,
yes.
too?
Well, it's a different look, huh? I think I look better in blue hair than I thought I would. Do I look like myself?
No.
I guess that's the idea.
Yes, you look your different self.
This is why goth is so timeless, because this was recorded 26 years ago, and that outfit and that look would not be out of place now. You will see people wearing similar, if not almost exactly like this kind of outfit nowadays. So that's why I think it's so timeless. And obviously it's because it's picking influences from periods in history and stuff, but I just can't think of any other subculture or fashion that you would still see sort of the almost exact same aesthetic so far down the line in a non-ironic sense. It's not like people are doing it in like a throwback sense. Like, it still is as fashionable, it still looks as good these days.
Also, true facts, it's really hard to get dressed by yourself.
I was hoping you'd admit it. I was hoping
I'm always
you'd say.
like, Conor, help! And I'm like, I can do it myself. Some people don't have someone to do it, I can do it, but it does take a lot longer to do it yourself. Like today I needed help just closing the back of this, but everything else, like, it can be hard to get chokers and necklaces, and like I'm wearing like a couple of different layers. Sometimes it's nice to get the help. You don't necessarily need it, but for corsets and stuff, I don't really wear those, but I would definitely need help with that. You always need help closing those up, so it's definitely a struggle.
It is an ordeal. Even for me, like with certain wristbands and like necklaces and stuff, I do need help. So if you ever meet a goth and they've just left their house and they are in full outfit and they left their house alone, commend them. Because if they managed to get ready and dress themselves entirely alone, that is an impressive feat.
Yeah, you find ways, but it's hard.
To all those different selves at the fan club. Special effects artist Gavin Decker, who makes fangs, says it's just like Halloween once a weekend.
There's something perfectly all right about things like Halloween and dressing up and being spooky and scary, and that's fine.
It's fun. It's just fun.
It's just fun for the most part.
And how do people get to like this particular type of fun?
My mother was a big fan of vampire movies and horror movies.
My mom started me off on ghost stories and horror movies, and I think I just took off from there.
That's so sweet. They pulled like a random pool of goths at this club and we're like, oh, how did you get into this? And they're like, my mom.
Yeah, like for me, it was my grandma, my nanny. She had me watching like horror movies and stuff, so I feel like that's a huge reason to why I am the way I am. But also, like, why are news reporters and stuff always like poking at people, like, look, pulling their stuff and like, that whole finger and... I'm sure like they asked for us, is it okay for me to touch your fangs? And they're like, yeah, sure, but like, how many
mouths was your thumb
How many
in?
mouths was your finger? How many fingers? How many of you? I'm broken from what I've just seen.
It does seem to be a running theme with these sort of things that the interviewers just seem to like grab at people and like touch their hair, their
Because
jewelry.
at the last one we did, everyone's like, stop touching.
She literally pulled like a girl's rosary beads, like nearly yanked them like off of her neck. Like literally, yeah, straight away you'd be like, what the hell? I'm assuming before the camera rolls, they say, oh, like, is it okay or whatever.
We can only hope.
Yeah, we can only hope.
Touch somebody's fangs.
It was a very interesting look into the late 90s goth scene in LA.
Vampires.
They did cast a fairly wide net of things that they did and people they spoke to. It just seemed like they either A, didn't speak to a lot of real like trad goths or anything, or it could just be like we said earlier, they probably edited them out. I do commend them though for casting such a wide net, because they spoke to him as a special effects artist. They spoke to the two girls at the start of the video who were like sort of vampire goths. They actually went to like necromance. They spoke to Terry King, the gothic clothes designer as well. So they did cast a fairly wide net. They did try get as much information as possible. I don't know if it was literally just that the 90s fascination with goth was so ingrained with vampire culture, it just sort of drowned out everything else.
Also, like, doing something about goth and not at all asking about music.
Yeah, there was no mention
At the club even.
of music anywhere in it. They had like lifestyle explainers, they had like the deep dive into the obsession with the imagery, they asked about the clothing design, like just the fashion like side of things, but they not once did anyone talk about music. Really bizarre, especially because like you said, they're at a club night.
I guess talking about the music wasn't exciting enough for them. And I feel like they probably used the people that said like horror movies and things like that. They probably did ask other people and they said like the music or whatever, or they got into the music through this, and they probably didn't use that.
They did pack a lot into a short, like 5-minute long segment, but I don't know, I felt like we missed out on a lot there. Again, we've been fooled. We were watching clips of Goths and it's just vampires again.
Yeah, so bad for us to be tricked into thinking we're watching Goths, but really we're actually just watching vampires yet again. You can't imagine what that would be like.
Well, like we said, it was an interesting look into the club scene in late 90s LA. It was a little less goth and a little more vampire-y than I would have liked to see, but it was still interesting. We got some decent points. Very cool seeing the fashion and stylings of the time. So as always, thank you so much for watching the video. We hope that you enjoyed it. A special thank you to our patrons for helping support us here on the channel and support us to keep making content. If you would like to support us on Patreon, the link is in the description down below, and until next time, see you in your nightmares.